All right, shalom aleichem, gentlemen. Welcome to our Wednesday class on Yalkut Yosef. We are in the topic of Tikkun Chatzot. Right before finishing Tikkun Chatzot and moving forward to Din Levishat of Begdim, how to get dressed in the morning. But we have to mention that today is also 10 years to the passing of Ateret Roshenu, the chief rabbi of Israel, Yalkut Yosef. Such a great character, and we're learning the material that his son wrote, the book by the chief rabbi, the current chief rabbi, Yalkut Yosef. So I feel like it's right to dedicate a few minutes to talk about him. So Be'ezrat Hashem B'li Neder, Baruch haba Ilan. Be'ezrat Hashem B'li Neder, at the end of the class, let's take 5 minutes to talk about Harav Chovdya Yosef Zecher Tzadik Livracha. But let's dive right in to where we stopped. All right, so we were towards the end of Tikkun Chatzot, and the discussion was whether what's more important. Let's read it together. סעיף מ"ט. עדיף יותר לומר תיקון חצות, אף שייתכן שעל ידי שיתעכב וישאר ערך חצות לילה לא יוכל להשכים לתפילת ותיקין. Someone wants to stay up because it's almost midnight, and as we learned, ברוך הבא Steve, as we learned, תיקון חצות can only be read after midnight. So he's about to get to midnight. He's like, should I go to sleep? If I go to sleep now, I'll wake up for Netz Minyan, which is a great value of a Netz Minyan. You should ask our friend Marcel over here that every morning hits the Netz Minyan. Or should he stay up later just so he could read Tikkun Chatzot? But his concern is that in the morning he'll be late. He won't be able to stay awake because it's going to require him to stay awake. He says, יישאר ער עד חצות לילה, לא יוכל להשכים, וכל שכן שבחודש אלול, עדיף יותר לומר תיקון חצות. It's better to say תיקון חצות. And he says even more so during חודש אלול. חודש אלול, a lot of people want to wake up early because they have to add selichot. So it seems from here, and this is the halacha, that Tikkun Chatzot is more important than waking up for Selichot. But Tikkun Chatzot takes 10 minutes, and Selichot takes us 45 minutes, 50 minutes, sometimes an hour, depending on how many Sitzulim the Chazan does. Still, Tikkun Chatzot is more important. I'm going to quote to you in the comments over here, the Chida. The Chida, Rabbeinu Chaim Yosef David Azulai brings, in his book Birkei Yosef, מי שקם באשמורת, הם כבר ציבור אומרים סליחות. Whoever woke up in the morning, let's say you woke up at 4, sunrise is at, 4:30 or so. He says, everybody's already saying slichot. And he says, now, I don't have enough time to say my tikkun chatzot. I can either say tikkun chatzot and then start shacharit with everybody, or I could say selichot. Which one would be better? He says, if I have to give up on one of them, it's better to give up on the selichot to say tikkun chatzot. If you remember, the Tikkun Chatzot can be said actually not exactly sunrise, it's still Alot HaShachar, that's 72 minutes before sunrise. The Tzibur already saying Slichot and you're late? No, more important to say Tikkun Chatzot. And why? What's the difference? How come Tikkun Chatzot is more important? So the language of the halacha, that's what we have to look at to understand the difference between them. When it comes to Tikkun Chatzot, over there it says, sorry, it's telling me I have bad internet connection. Everybody's able to hear me well? I hope so. All right. Yeah. Oh, okay, very good. So when it tells us that we have to say selichot, it doesn't say we have to. It says nahagu. It's a custom to say selichot. Custom is important. We like minhagim, but it's not. You're not obligated. Now, when it comes to tikkun chatzot, you're not exactly obligated also, but the language is a little bit more strict. It says ra'ui v'nachon. It's right and worthy for a person to get up. It's not the custom. So what's more important, when it's a custom or it's right to do? Right? Above that would be, you have to, which is a halacha. But according to Yalkut Yosef, Tikkun Chatzot is not a halacha where you have to stay up to say the Tikkun Chatzot. Only when you get to that time, if you're up, then it is right to read it. Okay. Let's continue on as we are finishing Tikkun Chatzot. Okay, now he's going to talk about the places that you say and don't say Tikkun Chatzot. So for example, he says in the bite of the Chatan, someone just got married on his wedding night, the father of the Chatan, do they say Tikkun Chatzot or a Mohel or a Sandak? All of these people, he says, they don't say Tikkun Chatzot in the night of the Milah or in the night of the wedding. Why? What's the reasoning behind it? Because Tikkun Chatzot, at the end of the day, it's sad. You're crying for the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, and therefore those happy occasions shouldn't be involved with things like this. So as we mentioned, Tikkun Chatzot is separated into two parts. And in Siman Nun Aleph over here, he writes, Tikkun Chatzot nichlak lebet chalakim. It's separated into two parts. The first one is called Tikkun Rachel, the fixing of Rachel, whatever that means that the Mekubalim talk about. And the second part is called Tikkun Leah. Tikkun Rachel, the first part, as we mentioned, talks about the destruction of Bet HaMikdash. And that's why the language of the halacha is that it's worthy to get up and to cry and mourn over the destruction of Bet HaMikdash, because the whole first part of Tikkun Chatzot is mourning for the Bet HaMikdash. But the second part, which is Tikkun Le'ah, it's basically praises to Hashem. It's Pirkei Teilim, it's praises to Hashem. So now he's going to explain, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but on what nights we say Tikkun Rachel and Tikkun Le'ah together, which is the whole package. For example, on the month of Cheshvan, which is now, from when Rosh Chodesh ends until Rosh Chodesh Kislev, that whole month is a month that we say Tikkun Le'ah and Tikkun Rachel. However, whenever you have a Rosh Chodesh or whenever you have a holiday, so sometimes you take out just Tikkun Rachel because that's the morning part, but you still read the Pakim of Tehillim. Sometimes you even take out both. If you look in your Sidurim, every time before you come to read, it'll tell you what's the difference. If it's Rosh Chodesh, if it's Firat HaOmer, there are different times where you say different parts. So when you're about to start, just look at the instructions before. But generally, Rosh Hashanah ועד שמיני עצרת, Rosh Hashanah until Shemini Atzeret, those are days, and the whole month of Nisan, those are days that we don't say Tikkun Rachel. There's days we don't mourn on those days, as well as, of course, Simchat Torah, Shabbat, all these times that are very happy. On those dates, we even don't say Tikkun Le'ah. We don't say anything of that Tikkun. Okay, these are more dry instructions. What happens of the night of Tisha B'Av? Baruch haba, Simon, long time no see. So what happens on the night of Tisha B'Av? So he says here that that's a unique night. It's the only night of the year that we just say Tikkun Rachel, but we do not say Tikkun Le'ah. As I'm reminding you, Tikkun Le'ah is praises to Hashem. Tikkun Rachel is crying over the Bet HaMikdash. So usually we say the full package. Sometimes they take away the full package, or they take away the morning part because it's a Brit Milah, it's a wedding, right? On this night, it's a night of mourning. It's a night of Tisha B'Av. So let's say the whole thing. It's Tikkun, it's sad. No, but the second part is praises to Hashem. It's like reading Tehillim. On Tisha B'Av, are we allowed to read Tehillim? You're not allowed to read Tehillim on Tisha B'Av. You're not allowed to learn certain parts of the Torah. So he's going to talk about that. We're allowed to learn stuff that have to do with the destruction of Bet HaMikdash, but just reading Tehillim on the day of Tisha B'Av is a problem. Now in parentheses, he points out something interesting. A lot of us grew up with the notion that Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to learn Torah. Anybody know why? Why is it forbidden to learn Torah on Tisha B'Av? Because the Torah makes you happy. That's the explanation. Divrei Torah mesamchim, it makes your soul happy. And therefore, on a day like this, don't learn Torah. When you learn a beautiful idea, your heart becomes happy. However, what do we learn? We learn only stuff that are relevant to the destruction of Bet HaMikdash, because what happiness is there, right? Even though for some people, they're happy in any Torah, of course. But that's what you're allowed to learn, right? But he says here something interesting. He says, don't think that you're forbidden to learn Torah on this day. You're actually obligated. Midivrei poskim, it sounds from the poskim, he says that you are obligated to learn Torah on Tisha B'Av. From that obligation, you have to deduct everything that makes you happy. So you're left with the topics of the destruction of Bet HaMikdash. But don't think to yourself, today, no Torah. You have to find stuff that you're allowed to learn and learn on Tisha B'Av. Another interesting halacha has to do with Shnat Shemitah. So in America, I'll tell you right off the bat, there's no difference Shnat Shemitah or not Shnat Shemitah regarding what you read and what you don't read in Tikkun Chatzot. But in Israel, there is a difference. During the 7th year, the Shnat Shemitah, we do not say Tikkun Chatzot, meaning the first part. You do not say Tikkun Rachel. We only say Tikkun Le'ah. All right? Now, I'm trying to give a logical explanation, but it's hard to give a logical explanation. The explanation here is more Kabbalistic. The Mekubalim explain why. What happens on Shnat Shemitah that we do not say a part of Tikkun Rachel. It's not like happy or sad. So one of the interpretations says is, yes, there's additional happiness in Shnat Shemitah, and because there's additional happiness, we remove the Tikkun Rachel. Now ask people, do you feel any additional happiness? What exactly does this mean? So I heard one of the Mekubalim explain, and why is this called Tikkun? Anybody know what Tikkun means in Hebrew? What is Tikkun? Tikkun is a fixing. Tikkun Chatzot, what we have to fix in midnight. So in order to fix what we have to fix, the upper world, whatever that means, we read these tikkunim and it does what it does, and it fixes and it brings down the abundance. However, during Shnat Shemitah, it seems like the fixing action of Tikkun Rachel, of the first part, is done on its own. All right? I don't know how that works exactly, but that's the explanation. Something happens on this Shnata Shemitah, Shnata Shabbat Yel Haaretz, Shabbat Shabbaton, the resting. There's a special thing that happens on this land. And you know what? If you talk to people that work in the fields, they're going to testify that something special does happen because it's unbelievable. 2 years ago, we had a Shnat Shemitah here. The people that were growing their clementines and their fruits, their vegetables, they were not allowed to sell them. Halacha is, it's up for grabs. Whoever wants, come and take. There are loopholes, ways around, but the dry halacha is, that's it. This year, we're not allowed to make business from our, so what do? These tzaddikim, a lot of them stop, say, whatever you want to come take, it's all Hashem's. We're not allowed to touch it this year. They sit, they learn Torah for 1 year. The next year, all of a sudden, the business goes crazy. Whatever they missed last year and the year before, because not only you're not allowed to take the fruits and sell them, you're also not allowed to plant. So it should hurt the next year, right? It says that after that, the fruits that come out are so big, so delicious, so whatever it is. People say miracles, that the prices of my item went up all of a sudden. We don't know how to explain it. But people that live in the field in Israel feel the emunah, see the emunah, and you drive on the streets of Israel and you see big signs. Po shomrim shmita. Come take the fruits. Over here we keep shmita. It's all yours. Unbelievable. Ashrei Israel. So maybe there is a happiness that is visible, but maybe not everyone. Either way, during Shnat Shmita, in Israel only, we only read the second part, Tikkun Leah, and not the sad part, which is Tikkun Rachel. All right. Now he talks about, and this is the final topic over here in Tikkun Chatzot. He talks about there's a confession of vidui before Tikkun Chatzot. But he says here that if you say the Tikkun Chatzot close to Shema, right, we read Shema al Amita. It's not just Shema Israel, there's also a confession during Shema. So he says if you're going to read them one close to the other, then the confession part, don't say it twice. Just say one confession for both parts, and he concludes, you also don't say Tikkun Rachel in the house of the Avel, only Tikkun Leah. All right, gentlemen, that was Tikkun Chatzot. Simon, since you are back, I asked the Kahal HaKadosh to remind us 5 minutes before we talk about Zecher Bracha, Harav Yalkut Yosef. So I'm gonna. Oh, Yona, Baruch haba. But we still have about 10 minutes, so we're gonna dive right into a topic. Thank you. We're gonna dive right into a topic called Din Levishat B'Gadim וכיסוי הראש. So now, let's be honest. Up till now, we were learning a topic that Tikkun Chatzot. I hope it becomes more relevant in our life and we do it every single day. I know a lot of people that do, but some of it seemed, one day we'll get there. But now we're going to deal with topics that have to do with every day. How to put the clothing on in the morning. Am I supposed to cover my hair? How do I shower? How do I compose myself in the bathroom? All these very practical everyday halachot of what is expected from a Jew. How am I supposed to behave? So let's dive right in. Din Levishat Begadim, the halacha of getting dressed and covering your hair. Yizaher liot tzanua keshelavesh u'poshet et begadav. When you take off your clothing or when you put on your clothing, careful to be tzanua. Velo yomar hineni bechadrei chadarim u'mi ro'ani. And you shouldn't say, I'm locked in my room. Who sees me? Why do I have to be tzanua? Let me walk around comfortable. Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu melo kol haaretz kevodo. You have to believe that the divine presence is with you everywhere. So even if you think that you're alone, compose yourself with humility. Don't be comfortably naked. No nudity. Yeah, when you get dressed, do it in a tzanua way. And any items that are normally covered, let's say I walk in the street, there are items that are covered, right? Whatever is covered normally in the street, even in your own room, cover it. Don't be like, okay, I have to compose yourself with humility. And when you wake up in the morning, be quick to put on your clothing. And someone that's small, it's not a halacha, he says that just from the age of bar mitzvah. Anyone from a young age that he already understands, today they say between 6 to 9 is that age, depending on the ability of the child. Whenever the child understands, teach him that getting dressed should be done in a humble way, in a tzanua way. Now in the comments here, he talks about the period where, how did Jews go shower? They would go to the river to shower in the river. That's how it used to be. So he says here like this. ואומנם, כשיורד לרחוץ בנהר, אין צריך לכסות אפילו ערותו. When someone just took off his clothing and he's about to go dip in the river, it says you're not obligated as you're walking towards the river to cover your private parts with your hands. ולא עוד, אלא שהמכסה נראה כאילו בוש. And even more so, don't do that, he says, because it looks like you are embarrassed of your brit milah, that you have a mitzvah over there. So don't cover it. וכאילו כופר בבריתו של אברהם אבינו. And it's as if you're going against the brit of Avraham Avinu, the covenant that we have with Hashem to do the brit milah. However, בעלייתו, when you're coming back from the river after you showered, when you're facing the crowd, right? So imagine there are a lot of men on the shore, they would go in to shower. So when they would come out, now everybody sees you. So when that happens, ישחה או ישים ידו כנגד רבותו. So you're allowed to bend a little bit or cover yourself with your hand. Just be careful not to touch your private parts, all right? So we see a very practical halacha. Today we don't see this so much, but when they would go shower in the rivers, what am I allowed to be comfortable with? So on the way in, you could be comfortably naked. You're not supposed to hide yourself. On the way out, cover yourself. ויש להעיר, and you brings another comment, that כל ההיתר ללכת ערום בנהר, the whole היתר that we have to go naked in the rivers, היה בזמנם. This halacha is for back in the day. שהיו רגעים לרחוץ בנהר, because that was the custom. This is how they showered. They would go into the river. אבל בימינו, in our days, he says, שדרך כל העולם לרחוץ בים ובנהר עם בגד ים, that everybody goes to the beach with a bathing suit. Says, then in that case, we are not allowed to, this is, and latir, we're not allowed to go naked anymore. So even though he brings the halacha, but he says that it's not relevant anymore today. But we just learned from this, in parentheses, the importance of tzeniut, how we shower has halachot. All right, halacha bet. אפילו במקום שאי אפשר שלא יתגלה מבשרו, כגון בבית המרחץ. It says, even in a place where it's impossible that anyone will see your skin. You're closed in a door inside a shower, או כשרוחץ בנהר או בים, or even when you're washing yourself in the river or the ocean, no one can see you, you're under the water. ישתדל כפי יכולתו שלא ילך בגילוי הגוף שלא לצורך. Make an effort to not show your body out as much as you can. ויזהר לפשוט ולבוש הבגדים סמוך למקום במרחץ שמתרחץ בו. Let's say you go to the mikveh. So don't, men sometimes they go into the mikveh, they start doing hakafot, walking around naked, comfortably. No, try to be humble as close as you can until you get to the water. When you get to the water, then of course, take off your towel and go in. But don't, try to hide yourself as much as you can. יזהר בבגדיו שלא ילבשם באופן שיתגנה בעיני הבריות. Now, he talks about the way of getting dressed after we know that we have to get dressed and cover ourselves. What type of items should cover my body? Should it be fancy? Should it be simple? Humility? Let's see. יזהר בבגדיו, be careful with your clothing. שלא ילבשם באופן שיתגנה בעיני הבריות. Don't put your clothing on in a way that people look at you in disgust. Look at this guy. These religious people, look at them. Look at them. No, חס וחלילה. שכל מי שאין דעת הבריות נוחה ממנו, because whoever makes people uncomfortable from him, from the way he appears, אין דעת המקום נוחה ממנו. Hashem is also not comfortable with his appearance. Now don't ask me about certain rabbanim, how come they do this, they do that. We're learning halacha right now. Halacha is, don't dress in a way that makes people look at you, this guy looks dirty. ואין תפילתו מקובלת לפני Hashem, and a person like that, he says, his prayer is not accepted in Shamayim. וכן ייזהר, and therefore be careful. כשלובש את הבגד, when you wear your clothing, שלא יתהפך הצד הפנימי. Some people wear their shirt upside down, like the label is hanging out from the back. You would think, not a big deal, whatever. He says, no, be careful that they don't see the stitches of your shirt on the outside. ויש לדקדק בזה אפילו בבגדים שתחת כל המלבושים. He says, and even if it's just the undershirt, no one sees it. I'm wearing an undershirt inside out, he says, don't do that. Anybody know why? What's the problem with wearing a shirt inside out? He says over here, it brings shichecha. It's a known thing that a shirt that is worn inside out makes people forget. Chachamim talk about a few things that make people forget. For example, they say if a man passes between two women, meshakech talmudo, it makes him forget his learning. Not just two random women, but let's say Arav Meir Eliyahu once told us that when he was young, he went on the bus and he just learned in the Gemara that if you pass between two women, it makes you forget your learning. And he didn't want to forget his learning. So he said they were talking between them, and I have to pass through in the bus to go to my seat. So he said, what am I going to do? I don't want to miss my learning. I said, oh, look up there. What? They moved their head, and he ran between them, because the halacha is only when they are looking at each other and talking, not when just two women. Then you can't walk in the street. But either way, we see that Chachamim had certain ideas about stuff that make you forget. One of the things is wearing your shirt inside out. And therefore, be careful not to do that. How important is this halacha? Be careful that there's no bad smell from your clothing. Hashem has mercy on his beriot. Wear deodorant, smell good. Be like other people. Don't be different. Don't look different. And most importantly, the Torah scholars, the people that walk with the black suits and the hat, everybody looks at them as a Torah figure. They're going to look not clean. They're going to smell not good. It's a chilul Hashem. That no one should say, look at these Torah learners, how they smell, how they dress. And listen to what the Rambam wrote. כתב הרמב"ם, מלבוש תלמיד חכם, מלבוש נאה ונקי. A תלמיד חכם has to get dressed up nicely and in a clean manner. ואסור שימצא בבגדו כתם. He's not allowed to have any stains on his clothing. You have a stain, change your shirt. או שמנונית, or some sort of oil, some sort of dirt. ולא יתלבש לו לבוש מלכים, and he shouldn't wear clothing of kings, because it draws attention. But lo malbush anim, so maybe a guy could say, okay, not king, I'm going to wear very stuff I got, in a flea market, 3 for 10, right? Let me wear those. He says, no. Lo malbush anim shu mevaze et lovshav. Don't wear clothing that people look at you, what is this guy? Ela b'gadim benoniyim v'na'im. Mediocre clothing that are clean and nice. That's the criteria of the Rambam. What's the right way to get dressed? All right. You know what? I see that we have 6 minutes left, so with your permission, we will continue from here next time on the topic of what we wear and how we wear. We have to give attention to this day, 10 years to the passing of Rabbeinu Agadol, Maran, Arav Ovadia Yosef, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. So I want to take you 10 years backwards to that day that we heard that Rav Ovadia passed away. Of course, me, my friends, all of Israel, maybe 1 million people, almost 20% of the Jews back then, or something like that, took their cars and drove to Yerushalayim to be part of the eulogy or part of the esped of the passing of Ovadiah Yosef. I remember how the highway looked that way. That miles before Yerushalayim, cars start parking on the side and getting out of the cars, walking aliyah la-regel, just so they could take part of it. 1 million people appeared. It was probably the biggest Jewish levaya in the history. So why? When you ask yourself, what did this great rabbi, which I proudly have this picture up here in my wall, right? You see it all the time. What makes this great rabbi so special that the whole world felt connected to him? So a little bit about the history of Ovadiah Yosef. He was born to a family, and his name when he was born was Ovadiah Yosef, not last name Yosef. That was his name. He had 2 names. Like I'm Yochanan Ziv, he was Ovadiah Yosef. That was the name of Rav Ovadiah. When he was born with that name. Ovadiah, because of the great famous Rav Abdallah Somech, Rav Ovadiah Somech, famous rabbi, and Yosef, because of the great rabbi from Iraq, from Baghdad, Rabbeinu Yosef Chaim, also known as the Ben Ish Chai. So he had 2 names of rabbis, Ovadiah Yosef. And his last name was Ovadiah. So his full name was Ovadiah Yosef Ovadiah. Not a lot of people know that. Only throughout time, the Ovadiah part left, and he just stayed Rav Ovadiah Yosef. They say about him that when he was 6, 7 years old, he was going to yeshiva, to Talmud Torah, and his father owned a grocery store, and so he needed help in the store. So he pulled his son out of the yeshiva, and he said, "You sit on the register. I need help here." The Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Ezra Tia, came to the store and told to the father, "This son is going to be a great Torah scholar. You're not allowed to leave him in here." He says, "What can I do? I need help." Rav Ezra Tia said, "If you need help, I'm willing to leave the yeshiva, come and sit on your register, just so this young man could go back to the Bet Midrash." He saw the potential, and he wasn't off. At a very young age, he got such wonderful achievements. They have the notebooks of Ovadiah, 8, 9, 10 years old, the things that he would write. At the age of 17, he wrote his first commentary, Yabia Omer. It really made I'm not talking about the big set of books, Yabia Omer. There's a certain part of Yabia Omer that he wrote that made a lot of noise in the world. No one could believe that he was so young. And he writes over there that people look at me and are surprised. How could it be? Why is he sitting with the Gdolim? How is he so young? Etc. He writes it with this beautiful language. He says, but I know that I have a mission. I have a mission and I'm going for it. And he went for it big time. Rav Ben Chaim, our rabbi, tells us that he doesn't think there was a rabbi like this in the last 300 years. And we had the zchut of seeing him, kissing his hand. Rav Ovdya Yosef. Well, so let's talk a little bit more about his greatness. We all know that he wrote a lot of 51 books, right? But one of the sets of books that he wrote is called Yalkut Omer. Yalkut Omer, people until today cannot believe that someone wrote this, meaning the way that stuff are written there, it's like an encyclopedia of knowledge. It's unbelievable that a human being wrote that book. Until today, they're all fascinated. He would not let go of the Torah. There was any free minute that he had. Stories about him that he went into a bookstore and he climbed on the ladder to reach a book that was high. And the guy went on a lunch break. He came back after 2 hours. He didn't know that he locked him in. He comes back, he opens the door, he sees that teenager standing on a ladder, still reading the book. He would not let go of books. Rabbis that came to visit him say, he would call us in, we would come in, he was writing, they would just wait sometimes for 15, 20 minutes. He wouldn't hear what's around him. He was so focused in Torah. His knowledge of Torah is unknown. He won an Israel prize for his Torah, of course. But that's just one factor of Ovdya Yosef. Ovdya Yosef, besides his amazing knowledge in Torah, he also did something historic for the Jews, especially the Sephardi Jews in Eretz Yisrael. The Sephardim, before he came into the pictures, halachically, everybody followed their own customs. The Moroccans, there were the Iraqis, there were everybody had their. He said, "We live in Eretz Yisrael. The halacha in Eretz Yisrael is like Rabbi Yosef Karo. He was the rabbi of Eretz Yisrael that wrote the Shulchan Aruch. That all the rabbis of his generation agreed we have to follow him." And he started spreading the knowledge of Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo. And even though he was such a great rabbi, he said, set mishurim in Batei Knesset, not just for yeshiva boys, for balabatim, for people that work, people that don't sit. Back in the day, there was the people that were learning in yeshivot, and there were people like us. No. He went to the people that are sitting at home, gave shiurim in Bet Knesset after Bet Knesset, even to a few people. He wanted to spread the Torah. And the way he spoke, the charisma, the ability that he had to get the crowd fascinated by him. So many different factors, but perhaps we'll conclude with one of the last things that when people would come and stand online to visit him, people would come and sometimes they would be crying about their tzarot. They want to get a blessing from him. He would right away cry with them. He loved everyone from Israel and he felt their pain. So much special things. I could honestly talk for hours about different stories. You know what I said, I'll conclude, but maybe I'll conclude with this. We mentioned this once in the past. When after Milchemet Yom Kippurim, the war of Yom Kippur, a lot of women were left without husbands, and it wasn't clear if their husband is alive or dead. Now, time is passing, and these women are young. They could remarry, they could have kids, but they're tied up, right? They're anchored women. They cannot remarry if their husband may come back one day. No one knew what to do with these women. They were crying, we're alone, we need a husband. So they came to many Rabbanim to try to find a loophole for them. No one was willing to deal with this matter. What if we let you marry somebody and then your husband comes back from captivity? The children are mamzerim. How could we ever do that? Everyone was terrified. Rav Ovdya was the only one that stood up with wide shoulders and said, I'm going to take care of this matter. And he was able to clear 950 women to get married. And none of their husbands ever returned. Now, why is this surprising? Because his son told, I heard this from the chief rabbi of Israel, his son said that there was one case where he just could not clear. He could not give the lady a loophole. She kept on coming. Maybe you can find me. He's like, I'm opening the books. I'm trying to find you, Lacha. Maybe the body was here, but there. He said, I'm sorry, I can't be material. You have to stay aguna. I cannot let you remarry. 1 out of 950 women. When the plane came back with all the people that were in captive, there was a list. And when the list was finished, everybody, all of a sudden, one man after the list finished, comes down with crutches from the plane. Who's this guy? Wait, he's not on our list. They find out that man was the husband of this lady. 950 women, he allowed them. One, he did not allow her to remarry. That one, her husband came back. What was that? Ruach HaKodesh, knowledge of halacha, whatever you want to call it, but special abilities. So we are crying and mourning today for the loss of our great Rav, but the good news is that he left a legacy. He left a derech and he left sons, each one huge in Torah. Now we're learning the current chief rabbi, his son, Rav Yalkut Yosef. We're learning his book, so I'm sure today we did a lot of nachat to Rav Ovdya Yosef in Shammai. Thank you for listening, guys, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, all the best.
Thank you, Ziv.
Thank you.